Hello and welcome, guys. My name is Mr. Rix. I'm a psychology teacher in the UK, and this video is about the multi-store model of memory, which is on the GCSE psychology spec for AQA, and I believe it's also on well, all the other specs as well. Um, the multi-store model is something that you will have to learn and go through. It could be one of the big questions on the exam, one of the 9-mark questions that you'll have to do in GCSE. And I find it is an easy thing to try and get to grips with because you can just repetitively try and recall this information. There's 9 pieces of information that you need to learn and put them in order, which are the ones that are on the screen right now. So the multi-store model of memory looks like this. Oh, let's stop there. So Atkinson and Schifrin, the psychologists that came up with this, devised this, and this is the one that you will have to learn for GCSE. It looks like this. It changes a little bit when you go into A level and you do memory in A level. The memory store looks a little bit more complicated. So for now, let's have a look at this one. Now, one thing I get my students to do as a teacher is I get them just for fun to try and guess, have a go at trying to think where those 9 key words or terms fit in this model. So they either go in one of the 4 boxes, and then the other 5 go around the arrows. Okay, so either on the arrows before them. Okay. If you want to have a go, because it's good to try and think what intuitively you would do, where you think things would go in this order. Okay, so just to let you know what this model is before you have a go. So the multi-store model of memory is, as it says, it's a model that shows the process of how we remember information. So going through the whole thing from information just existing in the environment and how it gets all the way to us remembering it and keeping it in our long-term memory store. Okay, so that's what the model is, a model of how we remember information. So if you want to pause the video, give it yourself some time to have a go at where you think some of those things would go. So I think it's a good practice, a good thing to have a go at, really. Okay, so let's go through the answers then. Let's talk about it. If you pause the video, let's see how many you got right. So the multi-store model, as I said, is a model of how we remember information. And the psychologists, Atkinson and Schifrin, believe that information passes through different stores, is what they're called, for the information to be remembered. So on the screen previously, there was the sensory store, short-term store, and the long-term memory store. Okay, so let's have a look. So this was the model. Let's go through. Okay, so for the answers, we start off with input. Now, this is input from the environment. We can't remember stuff if we don't have information to remember. So we live in a world with lots of stuff, and we have senses to take in and remember that stuff, right? They get input. Like a computer, you have an input. Yeah? Information is input. How is it input? Well, it's input through our senses to our what is called our sensory store, or I think different people might call it a sensory register. But sensory store, sensory register. Information is input from the environment, so if that's acoustic information, sounds, vibrations in the air, the molecules in the air vibrate a certain way, and they get taken in through the complexity that is our ears, and God, they're so complex. And then that information is taken in and stored in many regions of our brain that deal with sensory information. Now, do we remember everything that comes through our brain? No. We forget most of it. There is details. I'm sure you're looking at the screen right now. Maybe you haven't even noticed that at the bottom of the screen it says paper 1, cognition and behavior. Maybe if I ask you what order the color of the books were on the bookshelf behind me, you wouldn't be able to remember the order of the colors of the books on the bookshelf behind me. Okay, although you're taking in the information, it's coming in through the environment, you are registering it, it is going through your senses, but you're not going to remember it. Why do you not remember details in your periphery? Why do you not remember details? Well, it's probably because you're not paying attention to them. So psychologists believe that you need to pay attention to things for them to register into your short-term memory. So for you to even remember them for a short amount of time, you need to pay attention. Okay. So you've probably paid attention to the color of shirt that I'm wearing. You know that I'm wearing a black t-shirt. But beyond that, the stuff around me, you may have not taken notice of other things that are going on in the background or on the screen right now. Never mind in a more complex environment. So we pay attention to a memory. It comes in from our environment. We take in, sounds, things we see, things we hear, things we smell, taste, all the senses that we have. That information is from the environment. It gets input in whichever way through our senses, stored in our brain, or retrieved through the brain through the senses. If we pay attention to it, then we can hold it in our short-term memory for a little while, right? Also called working memory. It won't stay in there for very long. If someone read out their mobile number to you, or read out, probably more likely, a postcode, someone read out a postcode to you, you would not be able to remember that for any good length of time, unless you do what? Well, unless you rehearse that information. Okay, if you want to remember something like a postcode or a phone number or a license plate, and then you're going to have to rehearse that information even if it's just a few times. Okay. Now, if we rehearse information for long enough, what happens is that information won't stay in the short term. If we rehearse it enough times, it gets transferred to our long-term memory. So there we go. Most of the words are done there. If you pause the video and give it a go, let's see how many you got right. It's really good to be aware of the ones that you got right and the ones you got wrong. And if information's in our long-term memory, that is absolutely fantastic. We remember it for a longer amount of time, and we can store more in our long-term memory, which is something we'll talk about later on in the video. But what happens from our long-term memory? If I ask you a question like, what's the capital of England? You will say London, but that memory may have been stored in one part of your brain in your long-term, and in order for you to retrieve that information, in order for retrieval to occur, it gets transferred back to your short-term memory. Earlier, I said this is also sometimes called your working memory. Okay, if you're looking at different models, they call it working memory. And this is very complex and deals with a lot of different systems in your brain. Just what happens is the memory gets taken from your long-term memory and taken to a different system in your brain. So neurologically, it gets moved around, and that's what happens. Okay, so it goes from your long-term memory of a different one place in your brain to your short-term memory circuitry, and there's lots of things involved there. It's very complicated, but all you need to know is that you retrieve it from one to the other. And finally, at any one of these times, you can forget the information. So sensory information, I've already said. If you can remember the 5 colors of books on the top shelf without looking, then you're fantastic. But the likelihood is that you will have forgotten all the colors and the orders of the colors of the books on the bookshelf behind me, and you would have forgotten the details of things when you're walking down the street. You would have forgotten which cars you passed and what colors they were, and the people you walk by and what they were dressed like. You'd forget all that information. You've seen it, you've taken the information, it's input, but in your sensory store, most of that information gets forgotten. Same with short-term memory. If someone gives you that postcode or a license plate, you might remember that enough to write it down, like a shopping list. You may have remembered items long enough to write them down, but if you do not rehearse them or do anything else, or if it doesn't mean anything to you, and then it goes from your short-term memory and you forget it, right? A lot of short-term memories get forgotten as well. Now, long-term memories stick around for a lot longer and they're less likely to be forgotten, but I'm sure you've all had memories that have stayed with you for a long amount of time, and eventually you forgot them. Like an old mobile number that you knew off by heart, or friends' names from school, when you had different friends in school that have moved away. You may have forgotten your friends' names, things like that. Okay, so any one of these stages you can forget. Now, this is the part in a lesson where I get students to try and remember as much as that as possible, however you prefer to remember things. Have a go, stare at the screen if that's all that you do. Try and repeat the things in your head. Remember some of the things I said about the order. Have a go at trying to remember it. Pause the video. And then what I want you to do is I want you to try and write it down. So here it is. And pause the video. See if you can write it down in order. Can you remember all 9? Now, if you pause the video and you're back, these are the answers. So here's what it looks like. What do we start off with? Well, we need something from our environment that gets input. When information is input from our environment, how is it input? It's input through our senses into our sensory store. Only if we pay attention to it, then it can be transferred to our short-term memory. And if we rehearse the information, sorry, give that one away. If we rehearse the information in our short-term memory, then it can be transferred to our long-term memory. And when asked to recall something for an answer, perhaps, we retrieve that information to our short-term memory. And at any of these stages, can it be forgotten? Any information can be forgotten. Okay. There you go. So that is the multi-store model of memory. And as I said, this is something that I find quite easy to teach, because what can happen is I will just allow students plenty of time to rehearse and practice that again and again. So give it a couple of days and then get them to do it again. And that is if you're watching this video and you need to know this for your GCSEs, then I recommend you do the same. You pause the video again, right? See if what you can remember, play the video, rewind, play it again, and see what you can remember. And do that every couple of days, see if you can get it. Even if you're just using the textbook, you can use the textbook, right? You can write down what you think it is, open up the textbook, check. And the most important thing is that when you get something wrong, one of those, because there's 9 things, 9 is a lot of things to remember. If you get one of them wrong, identify which ones you got wrong. So to realize it, tick the ones that you got right, identify the ones that you got wrong, and remember that is the one that you got wrong. And for next time, you need to remember why was that wrong? Was that in the wrong place? Did you use the wrong word? Did you use recall instead of retrieval? No, okay, it's retrieval. That's the word I need, right? Identify what you need to do next time to remember one more. So there's 9 to remember. There's 9 to remember, so make sure that every time you recall it, at least you try and recall one more, right? You don't need to learn it all in one go, because as I've just shown you, that's not how memory works. You need to rehearse information according to this model. You need to rehearse the information to be able to remember it in your long-term memory. Okay. So I've talked about all of this. This is about information being held in our sensory store, paying attention to it, goes to our short-term memory. And if it's rehearsed long enough, it goes to our long-term memory. Now, some things extra that you're going to need to know for GCSE psychology is, well, this table, essentially. We talked about coding previously. We talked about how information is input. Yeah, that's coding, how it is changed into a form. That's your definition. Coding is when information is changed into a form or a format in which so you can understand and remember information. However, we've got 2 more there. So we've got capacity. Okay, what does the word capacity mean? It means how much. Yeah, so capacity, how much can we fit in our short-term memory? That's STM. How much can we fit in our long-term memory? That is LTM. And then duration is how long. So how long does a memory last, right? And how long does a memory last in our sensory store? How long does a memory last for in our short-term memory? And how long does memories last for in our long-term memory? Okay, so this is the information that you're going to need to know. So let's start off with the sensory store. So remember, information is input from the environment. It's acoustic information. Let's say you're hearing my voice right now. That is acoustic information. You're taking it in, all the complexities of the ear and all the things you can do with it. But it's taken in and it's coded. How is it coded? Well, you're going to need to know that information in the sensory store is coded how? Through the senses, right? Same way as it's received, just through the senses. Okay, nice and easy one. That's how it gets coded. If it's acoustic information, it's coded acoustically. Visual information, coded visually, etc., etc. So the capacity, how much information can we actually keep in our sensory store? Well, the answer is very limited. As I said previously, you might forget a lot of the things in your peripheral, right, the outside of your vision. When you're walking down the street, you forget the people that you pass and the colors that they're wearing and what they're wearing, and you know the different types of stone the buildings were made out of, and if there was a sale on in one of the stores, and you know, just all the you miss so many details, and that's just visual information, never mind acoustic information. Okay, if you're not paying attention to it, we can't keep much in there. Most of it gets disappears because we don't pay attention to it. So then, what's the duration? How long does it last for? And again, we're going to say less than a second. If we don't pay attention to it, it's just in and out, in and out, in and out. We register it. It goes, you know, you can see everything on the screen right now, but if you don't pay attention to it, it's not going to go any further than just you observing that information. Less than a second. Now, let's go to short-term memory and let's talk about coding. So, information can go in all those 5 different ways for our senses. Now, without getting too complicated, our brain has preferences for how information gets coded, right? How it goes into our brain. Depending on whether that information is just being stored in short-term memory or whether that information is going to be stored for a much longer time in our long-term memory. So, our brain has preferences. Excuse me. So we're going to set, that's the easiest way to put it without overcomplicating it. If you're watching this and you have a PhD in psychology, you'll know why I'm keeping it nice and simple. But so coding, in our short-term memory, we're going to say it's coded acoustically. Yeah, not as though we can't keep anything in our short-term memory that goes in visually, because we can, right? Obviously, we can remember things we see. Yeah, but what you need to know for GCSE is that our brain has a preference for acoustic information if you're just going to remember it for a short amount of time. Yeah, our brain just has a preference. That's the easiest way I can put that. If you study A-level psychology, you would have learned about a study by Badley about why this is the case and the differences between how information is processed. But GCSE, our brain has a preference for coding information acoustically if we're going to hold it in our short-term memory. Capacity of short-term memory, what do you think it is? How much do you think you can remember? Like, so, someone's phone number, do you think you can remember all 11 digits of someone's phone number? Or do you think you can remember 3 or 7 or 5? Well, the answer is, on average, 7 items of information can we keep. Okay, the answer is really between 5 and 9. Again, that's something that gets looked at in A-level as well. It's between 5 and 9, but cutting down the middle is 7. You would get a mark in an exam if you said any one of those things. So if you said between 5 and 9 items, you'd get the mark in the exam. If you put 7 items, you'd get the mark in the exam. Okay, so don't worry too much about that. So let's think about some of the examples I've talked about previously. So things that are in 7s, you know, postcodes, and what was the other one? Car license plates, right? They're in 7s. There's 7 items of information on there, and they're chunked up. They're chunked up into 3s and 4s. Yeah, postcodes in the UK chunked up into a 4 and a 3. And license plates chunked up into a 4 and a 3 as well, because everyone, I've said the capacity is between 5 and 9, so everyone can remember a 3 and everyone can remember a 4, but 7 items of information is average, okay, supposedly, which means that if that is the average, there's people that can't remember 7 items of information very easily. If you're on the higher end of the scale, usually I give little memory games to my students where I'll see how many numbers they can remember out of a 12-digit number or 11-digit number. See how many they can remember before they start messing up. And if you're on the higher end, if you can remember 9, 10, and then that is fantastic. How long can memories stay? How long can they stay in our short-term memory? Well, the answer is up to 30 seconds. That's what you guys need to know. So if you're doing GCSE psychology, you need to know that they stay in our short-term memory for up to 30 seconds. After that, if you don't rehearse them, and especially if you have other information that gets in the way of you remembering them, new information that you have to remember, any of that stuff is going to just lessen the time that you can remember something for. Okay, so if I gave you a 7-digit number to remember, then I started giving you something else to remember, or I didn't let you rehearse it, chances are you might find that difficult after a minute, 2 minutes, right? Okay, finally, long-term memory. So coded, remember I was saying about preference, how information goes into these memory stores. We have a preference for how they are formatted. And in long-term memory, we're going to say memories in our long-term are preferentially coded semantically. Okay, which if you remember, what did we talk about last lesson? If you remember my other video, we said semantic long-term memory, oh sorry, semantically encoding is about the meaning of the information. Okay, so if something makes sense to you, and a good teacher would do this, a good teacher, this is why I always say give examples and stuff, because they're things that help me remember, and you pick up how other people remember things as well. But if you, as a learner, no matter what age you are, if you're watching this as a GCSE student, or if you do have a PhD in psychology watching this, if you, as a learner, can try and take a piece of information and make it meaningful to you, whether that's silly or goofy or rude or just ridiculous, whatever you can do with that information to make it meaningful to you, and then there's more chance of you remembering it in your long-term memory. That's how our brain prefers to get information to be stored and formatted. Okay. Oh, sorry for all the yawning. I'm a teacher. Capacity for long-term memory. Okay, how long do you think memories stay in our brain for? Like even the longest of memories. Well, as far as we're aware, we can fit an unlimited amount of memories in our brain. How crazy is that? How fantastic is that? That we just haven't found the limit. I'm sure there must be a limit to how many memories we can have and how much we can remember, but we are yet to find what that limit is. Okay, so for your sake, we say what is the capacity of long-term memory? Unlimited, and this is the same for duration. Oh, this is the same for duration. We have an unlimited we can keep memories for an unlimited amount of time. In A-level psychology, people learn about studies where people try and remember people from when they were at school, from years and years ago and decades ago. And can you remember the people you were at school with? And can you remember the people you were at primary school with? And surprisingly, quite a lot of people can remember names and faces of things of people that they haven't seen in decades. So as far as we know, people can actually hold memories in their brain for their entire life. So for ease, just use the word unlimited, but essentially it's a lifetime. Now, have a go. So scroll back one. So you can pause the video, have a little go at trying to remember all 9 of those again, just like the multi-store model. There's 9 to remember. Have a go at remembering all 9 of these, and when you're ready, have a go and try and recall them in the grid. See if you can get all 9 right. If you cannot, then keep an eye on it. Which one did you get wrong? Take note. You need to remember that for next time. So, pause the video. Okay, I'll give you the answers. So, coding in our sensory store. So, we get information in input from the environment. How does it get coded originally? Through our senses, obviously. Nice and easy. How long does this, how much can we fit into our sensory store? Not much. And how long does it stay there for? Less than a second. Not very long. Short-term memory, what do we prefer? How do we prefer to take information in and format in our short-term memory? The answer is acoustically. how much can we fit in our short-term memory? Remember my examples. What were my examples? Okay, license plates, postcodes. We can fit 7 items, 5 to 9. In the middle, 7 items. And how long can we fit something in our short-term memory for? The answer is, oh, you want it again? Up to 30 seconds. Okay, long-term memory, finally, coding. I think it's because I've got the lamp on and making me yawn. It's a very warm lamp. Long-term memory. How do we prefer to remember things for a longer amount of time? How do we process that? How do we code that? It is semantically. Well done. Capacity. How much can we fit? In our long term, it's unlimited. And how long can they stay in our long-term memory for? Again, unlimited. Well done. This is everything that I'm covering in this video. Multi-store model of memory, and for each store, the coding, capacity, and duration. You need to know all of those. Coding, capacity, duration. Coding, capacity, duration. They're all things that you need to know for GCSE psychology in the memory topic. Now that I'll leave some quick questions for you. You can pause the video, have a go at some of these quick questions for your GCSE. 3 types of retrieval that we looked at last lesson. What were they? Name 3 types of encoding. 3 types of long-term memory that we also looked at. And describing one of the long-term memories that you wrote about. What is the capacity for the sensory store? What's the duration of short-term memory that we looked at this time? So, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video where hopefully I'm not yawning as much. Bye, guys.